Hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Scotch and AI, where we explore questions, issues, potentials around artificial intelligence, machine learning, and of course, Scotch whiskey. My guests today are Elisa Choi. Elisa, say hi. Elisa is an economist, a data translator, a strategist, and a speaker. She's worked in mergers and acquisitions, corporate advisory, private equity, media strategy, analytics, and now founder and CEO of Data Maven. And
Maven,
I'm sorry?
Mark, Maven Data.
Maven Data. I am so sorry, Maven Data. I'll let Elisa do justice to that fascinating and amazing initiative that she's founded. Welcome, Elisa.
Thank you so much.
And we also have Damon.
Hi.
Damon is a true data scientist. He's also founder and CEO of a number of startups in analytics and AI, but Damon started out as a professional blackjack card counter. He's also been a professional sports bettor and poker player and was the co-founder of Poker News. He then moved into economics and now data science. Damon, I'm keen to hear more of that fascinating story later this morning.
Sounds good.
I'm also feeling a little bit intimidated here as you've both got amazing postgraduate level qualifications in economics, founders of several startups. I'm outshone completely. But Elisa, perhaps you can kick us off and just tell us your story. How did you end up in analytics, and how did you end up founding Maven Data?
Well, good question. My journey to where I am today has actually been a bit of I'll call it snakes and ladders. So I started my life as, I studied economics and finance at uni, and I thought I wanted to be an investment banker because that's where all numerate analytical people go to earn a lot of money. And so I spent 8 years in finance in various roles, so corporate advisory, M&A, investment management, like buying companies through private equity, investing in startups through venture capital. And then the GFC hit in 2009. And so that shook, that was the first global sort of big shake-up. And so I was made redundant for the first time in my life when redundancy wasn't very cool. It was a bit of like, getting a divorce back in, 20 years ago. Now everyone's getting a divorce. So that was my first redundancy. It, triggered me to change a couple of directions. And then I decided I wanted to do something completely different. I was a little bit sick of finance. I wasn't really feeling the purpose, but I was always wanting to follow, using data to make decisions, but, more than just financial decisions on an Excel spreadsheet. So I moved into sales and then marketing and then insights and then analytics through various roles, working for some of the largest companies, ASX 10 listed companies in Australia. I thought I wanted to become a corporate ladder professional woman. But then, I realized after 16 years in working in corporate, I loved data. I loved working in insights, and I started developing a knack for explaining and translating data in business speak. So I think the birth of, the data whisperer moniker really started a couple of years ago, 5 years ago at Caltex, working in their data and analytics center of excellence. And we were answering questions around the business, whether it's marketing, fuel pricing, property, merchandising, and using data science because they had a lot of internal data to work with. So that was my first, I suppose, foray into analytics. And I obviously saw that this was a trend here to stay. This was a need and a skill set. And so from there, I did more work in the area. I'm not a data scientist. I'm a practitioner. So I always like to say that there's a lot more smarter people than me that build the machines. I just know how to drive the Porsche really fast. So 2 years ago, I started my own business. I think it was time in my life to do my own thing. And so I set up my first business, which works with companies and their internal data sets to uncover insights. So a typical consulting agency, and that's called Strategic Data Central. And then this year, during COVID, I launched Maven Data, which is using external market data, particularly with AI. And that's what we're going to talk about today, right? So, and that's Maven Data. So it's Australia's first AI-powered market research agency.
Which is fascinating, and that's exactly why you're on the show, because it is something that no one else is doing that I'm aware of. I mean, it's amazing. So, I mean, you're using AI and machine learning to measure and analyze human emotion to predict behavior. In fact, your platform, if I can call it that, successfully predicted the winners of The Voice 2019, The Voice 2020, MasterChef Australia 2020. How does it work?
Well, I can't claim to be the brains behind building that Porsche, because I work with a company called Significant Systems, and they're a global company, and they've been developing this platform for over 8-9 years now. And the founders of it, they were heralded by Forbes as those who came up with the term social media back in the 90s. So they're quite forward thinking. And so 8 years ago, they set out to build this platform to understand what really matters through emotion. And so their platform is underpinned by natural language processing and a lot more complicated tech that I can't describe or will never understand. But as I use the information that comes out of it, it's a set of diagnostics. And part of that is when you're understanding, predicting the market, like in the example of the voice competition or MasterChef Australia, it was a very clear example of, the theory that when people are driven by emotion and emotions change behavior, strong emotions particularly change behavior. If we can tap into that and measure that and analyze that, then you can predict how people will behave, and that inherently changes the market. So the voice competition, the last 2 years was a clear example of that. Just running that through analytics was far more effective than looking at social media metrics, likes and follows and shares.
Yeah, okay. So it's a kind of a sentiment analysis across a massive social listening platform and exercise, and then you're pulling the insights out of that.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing to describe it to is social listening, but social listening is looking only just at social media platforms. And so we know that we live in a world, a universe of bubbles, really, and social media platforms are these big bubbles: Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, you name it. So this allows us to actually, it's one subset of the market that we look at. When I say market data, it's actually anything online, unstructured content. So that's where most of the world's data actually sits, not in companies, but actually outside companies. And so when you're looking at market insights, you need to get insights from market data. And technology like AI allows us to process this extremely fast, extremely efficiently, and you get better outcomes, as proven by just these little examples.
And in the commercial world, what would be some applications that you'd be looking for commercially, potentially?
So in the commercial world, we've been working on a lot of different applications, because it's essentially around reading the market. What do people deeply care about? Because what people deeply care about, they pay attention to, because attention can be purchased, but engagement needs to be earned. And when we live in an economy that's an attention economy, we're so busy, we're bombarded with what I call noise. Noise doesn't cut through. So in fact, most of what we look at in the world, content-wise online, is noise, right? And so what we try to find for brands, for companies, is to understand, firstly, what are the deepest issues related to their industry? It could be around their product, it could be around their brand, it could be around their competitors' brands. And we can look at this not only from an Australian perspective, but in any country in the world, in their natural language. So that's even more powerful than the traditional market research methods of surveys, polls, or focus groups, because we know that those methods still have their place. But when you're doing strategic market insight research, you need to go to market data with a broad scan.
Sounds fascinating. And you've got some good stories up your sleeve, I know, but I'm going to cut over to Damon. Thank you for your patience, brother. You've waited very politely. You started out as a professional blackjack card counter. Tell me about that.
That's right. I was 18 and I walked into a bookstore, and I don't usually use props, but this was a doorstop. We've just moved house and we're using it as a doorstop. It was $1 Million Blackjack by a guy called Ken Houston. So I bought that book for $5 and I read it in a night, and half the book was about blackjack strategy, like how to actually beat the casino. And the other half of the book was fascinating stories that this guy, Ken Houston, and his team of blackjack card counters had led, a life that they'd led over about a 15-year period playing blackjack around the world. And after I finished reading that book, I decided that's all I want to do in life. And I trained every day for 6 months until I was ready to go into the casino and start practicing. Started off playing low stakes blackjack, counting cards. And after over about a 3 or 4 year period, I'd build up my stake and my notoriety in Australia, so that I was running sort of large teams, or doing trips all around the world, and it was a full-time occupation playing high stakes blackjack at casinos all around the world. So it was an interesting lifestyle, some incredible stories, some amazing friendships that came out of it. But it was also a great training ground for data science and statistics, because you have to be incredibly disciplined to play blackjack. You need to have great money management skills. You need to have great technical skills, and it's repetition. You have to be doing the same thing over and over again. So a lot of people that cut their teeth in blackjack and card counting have gone on to be very successful business people. Yeah, it's a fantastic training ground. It was a great life, but you eventually get banned. That's the problem when you.
That was my next question. Did you ever get kicked out of a casino?
Many times, and it would range from a very polite conversation with 2 or 3 gentlemen in suits to a little bit on the edgy side, where your life may or may not have been threatened, especially playing downtown Las Vegas in small casinos. It gets a bit nerve-wracking at times. Wow. But that was the life back then, and some great memories from it.
Fantastic, interesting, and we'll come back to some more sports betting stories in a minute. But I looked at your Advantage Data website, and Rankster in particular. It seems to me like you're doing something with data and with SEO, or an AI-driven approach to SEO that I haven't seen done anywhere else before. So maybe we'll segue straight into that, and you can unpack your unique value proposition.
Yeah, that's right. So after I finished my gambling days, I ran a number of startup businesses, internet startup businesses, and they all used search engine optimization. You mentioned Poker News at the start in the introduction. That was it became the largest poker media site in the world. It still is today, and a lot of our traffic came from search engine optimization, and we were doing it in-house, and we were using external agencies, but it was an incredibly frustrating period for me, because I had no insights into what was actually happening. It was a bit of a black box. We didn't know if we did this, what would happen. If we tried this, is this the right way? Is this the right approach? And if you read forums, there's everything is contradictory. So having a data science background, about 18 months ago, we decided, accompanying Advantage Data, to actually build an algorithm that would essentially reverse engineer a lot of the key features that search engines like Google use when they determine which sites rank organically. And if we can know the drivers using machine learning, we can address the issues, and we can explain to webmasters, if you take these actions, you're likely to increase your rank by X amount, which will turn into this amount of traffic and perhaps this extra revenue. And one of the really important things in our algorithm is it uses explainable AI. So for years, data scientists have been fascinated with predicting an outcome like a Y value. These days, I'm more fascinated in the X's. What's driving that Y value? And it's a new area of data science called explainable AI. And it started off in the financial services space, where there was a necessity because of regulation to explain why decisions were being made, why someone would get a home loan, why someone wouldn't. But we've used a lot of that technology in many applications we've built, and especially Rankster, our SEO tool. So we can work out, we can estimate what's driving search engine rankings, and then provide, sensible recommendations to help improve rankings.
Yeah, and speaking from first-hand experience, as BIIT Analytics, we've actually engaged Rankster to make some proposals around adjustments to a website that a company we're looking to work with, and
That's right.
Fascinating detail and very, very specific, very precise recommendations, and then the exact impact that adopting those recommendations would have in terms of SEO. It was a very, very high-value piece of work.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the interesting findings, like going into this research project, I knew a lot about SEO, but I was shocked at the outcome as well. I was thinking, like, things that were popping up, I would never have thought would have been on the radar, but they were coming up as significant factors. Things like how accessible your site is to disabled people. It's not something that might be front of mind when you're thinking about your search engine positions, but it's something that Google is weighting very highly. And when you think about it, it's quite right for them to do that. User experience is a very important thing, but it's not front of mind when you're thinking about SEO. Most SEO practitioners are thinking about getting as many backlinks as they possibly can, pointing at the site that they're trying to increase the rankings for. And that that factor is actually, quite a way down the list in most applications. So that was a very interesting finding for us.
Fascinating. And Elisa, I can see you smiling. I wonder what you're thinking right now.
Well, I suppose when I changed out of finance, I worked at Census, which is part of Telstra, and Australia's largest directory site. You remember the yellow pages, those books?
Indeed.
You know, those other book that you got. There was those other yellow books as well that were going around. So they had a lot of data, and we were also selling back then SEO and SEM packages, and that was before Google really took off, and we had to explain what a website was, etc., etc. So it fascinates me that we've always been so caught up on, backlinks and keywords and, all the sort of mechanical stuff, but there are all these side elements now that's evolved that you're now picking up on, and I found that completely fascinating. So, but only data could tell you that, and that's
yeah. Exactly. That was I was at my wit's end with SEO companies before we started this project, thinking like so many contradictory pieces of advice. I can only imagine what a webmaster who didn't have this sort of background would think when they try to increase their rankings. It's like a black box for them. So our idea was just to shed some light on that. And the use cases that we've had so far have all had a reasonable increase in rankings, and I think we'll talk about that a bit later. But yeah, it's been eye-opening, and that's for me who understands a lot about SEO.
Fascinating. I'm going to pass to Elisa. We were talking earlier. I said I'd ask you for some success stories in Maven Data and some of the things that you've been working on. What can you tell us?
So off the back of the work I did with the TV competitions, I did a piece of work with Channel 7, and they were looking at promoting one of their new shows, which is actually up on air now, which is State of Origin. And their brief was that, they were supposed to be hosting the Olympics back in July with Channel 7. And so they were going to use Channel 7 as a promotional platform to promote this new show, which was yet another cooking show. And the context behind that was that MasterChef Australia, if you remember last year, the 3 judges had left the show.
Yeah.
And there was a new breed of MasterChef judges that appeared this year. And so they wanted to put up another MasterChef show because they had MKR, My Kitchen Rules, which was hugely successful. But they came up with this play with Plate of Origin, which country's got the best cuisine in Australia, playing off the Olympics a little bit. And so they had produced this show, and the marketing team came to me and said, we wanted to understand how to best market this show. It's already produced, right? So there were elements of it where they could have gone to traditional market research or asked a bunch of people what they thought about this and that, mined their own internal data, but this was a new product. The context was completely different, and they wanted to get a very quick read on what the market in Australia felt about a whole raft of things. So we structured a project around, firstly, uncovering what were the key essential ingredients to making a very good TV reality show for free-to-air. And using the methodology that I explained, we essentially scanned all the world's content and all the content online in relation to certain topics, and they were categorized. So we looked at cuisine shows, all the top cuisine shows around the world that were top rated. We looked at cast members or celebrity chefs. We looked at general genres around reality TV, drama, all these different genres that we see. We were testing all of those. And out of that, we came up with some really interesting insights around who mainstream Australia really is. Because if we think about it, we think about mainstream Australia as white. And we're talking, for a mainstream network, they have to get broad reach and have to be highly relevant to as many people as possible for free to air. So understanding what are the drivers and what are the behaviours and what are the elements of mainstream Australia. What I found really interesting was that during this research, there were pockets of mainstream Australia. So it's no longer white mainstream Australia. You've got what I could say bogan white Australia, you've got bogan Asian Australia, you've got bogan Indian, and you've got bogan wogs, and you've got, there's many, many subcultures, and each of those is a reflection of society and how migration patterns have happened across generations in Australia. So Taking those elements, we were able to uncover, I can't tell you what they are, but there were things that they knew that validated what they knew about mainstream Australian audiences. So new things which allowed them to tailor their promotion and marketing and messaging to be on point. And we also gave them insights into what the market thought about the 3 cast members for this show, because they took actually 2 judges from MasterChef Australia. So they took Gary and they took Matt. And they also brought across Manu from their other show, which was MKR. So they brought those 3 heavy hitters into this new show. They've never worked together on the show. So again, we did a quick read on what did the market think about these 3 individuals? Why did they like them? Why did they not like them? Some of them had a very strong engagement, the emotions around those engagement, and that helped provide a playbook to these 3 cast members to either play up certain elements, downplay certain elements, etc. So that was a really interesting piece of work. It's quite unique, but that's an example of how we used AI really quickly to do very effective market research.
That's fascinating. Fascinating. Is there anything you're working on right now?
Oh, I'm always working on things. And, anybody with a curious analytical mind is always, looking at understanding the world. So I've got a couple of things on the boil. One is actually understanding, kind of like the SEO conversation, understanding what creates engagement within LinkedIn. So, LinkedIn is a very powerful platform for business. And I would say that it's, for me personally, it's been more effective than having my own website, to be honest, to be fair. And so with LinkedIn, part of what I am working on is uncovering or decoding engagement. What makes something viral on LinkedIn?
I would love to hear that.
Well, I recently did a post like last week, I think less than a week ago on Thursday. And I just put a basic post of myself saying, I've rebirthed, I'm relaunching my brand, with a good photo, with a good killer statement, which was data is confidence. And that post was just me putting something out there. It's gone viral. So like on last count, which is 10 minutes ago, it's clocked up close to 15,000 views.
Wow.
And I've got only 4,000 connections, so it's almost 4 times the reach of my own first degree connections. And I was thinking, what made that really fly? And I have a theory which I've been working on. It's 3 things. There's an element of what are you talking about? Is it relevant? Do people actually care? Because, if you're talking about stuff that's 90% of the noise, nobody cares. Nobody cares. So you need to have a message that is on point with what people care about. The second element is how are you talking about it? It's the tone. Because if you're not speaking to the right tone, then that's what I call tone deaf. It's like you're singing off key. So if you're talking about an issue and it's not congruent to your message, then it's off tone. And you can see examples of failed campaigns, politics as well, where people say something, it's just off tone with what the sentiment is currently in the market. So the second element is how you talk about it. The third element is execution. It still goes back to good old technical execution. So when it came to that particular post, I was decrypting what made it so successful. It was a very strong message. The message was relevant to my audience, obviously. My tone was on point, which was on point with my brand. And then it was backed up by killer photo, so killer visuals, killer copy, simple, sharp, and congruent. So all those 3 elements, I believe, is what made that particular post go viral. So what I'm going to do now is package that up into, a simple offering. It's like anyone who's got a message, anyone who's got a business or a brand, they need to know what people care about related to their industry and their business. They need to match the tone of the market, and they need to execute brilliantly.
Honestly, when this is over, I'm going to go back and watch that again and take notes because I think what you've just unpacked there is actually priceless.
IP in the making. It's literally me in the kitchen in the last 7 days thinking about this and really understanding how can we bring this to the world in a more effective manner, because what I don't want to see is more noise. We just don't need any more noise. We want more effective communication. Everybody wants to have their problem solved. And if someone could just present it to them and easily, they'll engage and they'll buy. It's as easy as that. That's what I think.
That's brilliant. Talking about solving problems, Damon, I'm looking for some real story, real ROI from some of the clients that you've worked with.
Yeah, well, just picking up on something that Elisa said, a lot of the work that we're doing is involving natural language processing as well. So in terms of success stories, one of the things that we've managed to do is have our AI algorithm automatically write title text and descriptions for webmasters. So that's obviously their first point of contact with the outside world. If someone Googles a result, the title text and the description that comes up in Google is the first point of contact. And how you maximize that click-through rate is incredibly important in determining how much traffic you're going to get. And I could see the natural link to what Elisa was talking about in terms of LinkedIn messaging. We've also built an algorithm that will help automatically write text ads for search engine marketing as well. So it's very similar to what you were just proposing there, how you can make a post go viral. I'm sure a lot of the technology is quite similar. In terms of ROI results that we've had through Rankstar, so we went live in January, and we've got 15 pilot clients. The client that's had the best success is a company called Crypto News. So they provide news, as the title suggests, around cryptocurrency. And they've had about a 60% increase in their traffic after adopting some of the Rankstar recommendations. Now, it was quite a interesting use case, because I presented the Rankstar report, which is the first step to this group, and I know the CEO well, and it was kind of left at that. I wasn't sure if he's engaged and didn't really get any feedback, but he contacted me a couple of months later and said, "Oh, thanks for all that information. We adopted the changes and look at our traffic now." So I didn't even know that they were working on it in the background. So that was like a pleasant surprise that I got. We've worked with, where Rankstar works really well is with e-commerce platforms. So there's a number of e-commerce platforms that we're working with at the moment. One, quite a few in the golf industry, actually, golf simulators, retail golf, skin products, etc. So e-commerce is really a low-hanging fruit for Rankstar, and also sites that want to get a lot of traffic around brand reputation, brand building. That's also low-hanging fruit. But typically, like, the best we've seen is about a 70% increase. Typically, we're seeing 10 to 20% increases. But SEO is an incremental thing. You're not just going to get immediate results. So it needs a longer time to draw out some better use cases. But no one's gone backwards and everyone's gone forward, including a lot of the sites that I run as well. I own at least 10 sites that I can think of off the top of my head that we've implemented Rankstar, and things are looking up for all of them.
Oh, that sounds great. Quick shout out to Steve. Hi, Steve. Thanks for passing on the comment. For our audience, if you do have any questions for Elisa or for Damon, by all means, post them in the chat panel on the
I've got a question for Elisa. Can I give my question? I've been dying to.
Please.
This is my sports betting and professional punting background coming out. Have you used any of your results in those sort of applications? Like, you can bet on the outcome of MasterChef or on The Voice. In fact, I got two text messages on the final night of MasterChef from friends, both saying that the other person they'd heard rumors are going to win. So I got completely conflicting text messages from inside information. But and I'm thinking about the power for financial markets as well. Is that a possible use case for you?
I'm seeing a very dangerous synergy here, but it's fascinating.
Well, funny you mentioned that. So you got two parts to your question. Where it was prediction week, when it was The Voice 2020 and MasterChef and Big Brother. And off the back of the 2019 exercise, which I was just bored, and I was like watching it, and I was like, oh, I wonder if this works on that. Then I thought, this year I'm going to do it again. And then I got it, right? And you can bet on The Voice. So then this year, I put a little bit of money on Sportsbet, and I put it on LinkedIn as my prediction. I told everybody who I thought was going to win. And so after the first one, because I got that one, I won some money. It was at $7.50 for the winner. Very good odds. And I'm not a big gambler, but I do have a penchant for gambling, because it's the Asian genes, I suppose. So I a lot excited. And then so when it came to MasterChef, I put the post up and said, look, I think Amelia's going to be the one. I didn't bet on MasterChef, but then when it came to Big Brother, you can bet on Big Brother. And I don't watch Big Brother, to be fair. So I had no idea who the finalists were, as did most of Australia, apparently. Because what happened was I predicted who I thought was going to be the winner. And I ran the analysis too early. I ran it 24 hours too early because for that particular show, Big Brother, it's kind of like a flippant sort of contest. The people that win, it's a popularity contest. There's nothing meaningful or meaty to engage with over time. Honestly, nobody knew who the three people were until they were announced as the finalists 24 hours before the final vote, right? So whereas MasterChef and The Voice, you had many weeks to really develop a love for whoever it is that you wanted to sponsor and vote for. So yeah, with Big Brother, I think I got a little bit too excited. I called it a little bit too early, and hence the market moved very dramatically over 24 hours. So I got it wrong, and it was like, but I put more money on it on the other one. So I lost a lot more money than the first minute earlier in the week. But that taught me a lesson. I shouldn't be betting on this stuff. So yes, I have used it, and I have been sort of looking at global, competitions of similar nature, because
politics is the natural fit, surely.
Yeah, so people have been asking me a lot about politics. So the thing about politics is that unlike the Voice competition, which is if I like someone, I vote, the vote gets counted, and it's a very simple format. Most votes win. When it comes to politics, particularly US, people have been saying, can you predict the US election? That's more difficult because a vote, firstly, their system is, they've got the collegiate system. So a vote, you can have the most number of votes, like Hillary Clinton, but she didn't end up winning the election, did she? So that's harder. There's a lot more other things going on. And that's not even talking about, whether things are done rightly or wrongly, how they count votes. So politics is not something that we could say we could predict per se. However, we can add colour to the sentiment and the story around what's going to happen. And ultimately, at the end of the day, for the US, it's not compulsory voting. So you have to get people to care deeply enough to vote. And you look at the success of Trump in the last election. Obviously, he used a lot of data behind him. We're talking, Cambridge Analytica style data, which we don't do. We don't really look at individual people. We don't care whether what demographic you are. We're looking at an entity of people online, right? So when you're looking at what he's done, the emotions around him, he's very polarizing. But the polarizing element means that people deeply hate him or people deeply love him. And when you have an intense emotion, you change your behavior, as opposed to if you're like, oh yeah, he's pretty nice. Oh yeah, that's all right. That's kind of cool. You don't do anything. But when you really feel intense emotion, you do something. So that's interesting to add commentary to elections, but no. But then last year we had the federal election? Was it only last year?
Oh,
last year.
Last year.
A long time ago.
A bit's happened since then.
A lot's happened since then. I remember thinking, do you all remember how it was supposed to be a landslide win by the Labor Party, according to all the polls, right? I had a feeling I should run it, but I didn't, because I believed what everyone else believed, which was, all polls said, hands down, landslide, Labor. No, obviously that didn't happen that way. So had I run it then, I think I would have picked up something around it being contrarian to what everybody thought. So yeah, I think for the Australian election, a little bit clearer sight to prediction. US, definitely not. And then your second question was about financial markets. Yes, we are looking at, we're actually looking at this now with the NASDAQ. There's a couple of stocks that we can actually track price proxies to using emotion to the market. So financial markets are an interesting one because it is also fueled by emotions as well.
Mm-hmm.
You read up into financial markets and animal spirit, when there's times of fear, people act a certain way. When there's times of, sentiment that is positive, then they act a certain way, and it flows into the stock market as well. So yes, in short, we are also looking at that.
So you're a professional gambler as well.
Well, you can kind of call it that way. Yeah. Professional, not yet. Amateur.
Sounds fascinating. So I think, I mean, I love the synergy here. I'm so glad I got both of you on the same show. This has been fantastic. So I guess it's, in a way, to summarize, we've got a couple of somewhat different, but in some ways similar, different approaches to marketing, branding, positioning, reading and responding to the market. You've got sort of SEO on steroids over here with Rankster and Damon, powered by machine learning, driving up search results and recommending all the mechanisms to increase search rankings based on what the data is telling you to do, rather than finger in the air SEO expert who gets paid a lot of money to sort of have a few guesses around what's going to drive up your search rankings. And then we've got a kind of my best summary would be social listening on steroids, but then, you know, sentiment analysis around that, and then understanding how that drives human behavior. So I think this has been a very, very enlightening session, and still grateful to Steve for his comment. I'll just throw that up again. That this has been incredibly valuable. I will definitely go back and replay this after my Scotch. So our Scotch of the fortnight is Oban. This was a gift from my boss, actually. Shout out to John Good, much appreciated, from the Oban Distillery, which I found in my little book on Scotch whiskies. And I haven't opened it yet, but it talks about having a lovely balance between the peat, the malt, and the spirit on the nose. I love a good peaty whiskey. One of these days we'll have a Lafroig. But that's the Scotch part of our Scotch and AI. Thank you again, Elisa. Thank you again, Damon. Really, really appreciate your time and your conversation. It's been a fantastic session. And this will be posted up shortly on the YouTube link that I'll send through. And what day is it today? Thursday. Have a fantastic rest of Thursday, Friday, and a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Take care.